A moment of silence for the lives lost in the deadly condo collapse in Surfside, Florida, as first responders make a painful pivot from search and rescue to recovery mode. This comes as a grand jury in Florida seeks ways to prevent another building collapse. Google is being hit with a slew of lawsuits. 36 states are suing the tech giant over its App Store practices. And Tokyo declares a state of emergency in Japan ahead of the Summer Olympics. Another big change, no spectators will fill the stands for this year's games. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. A somber development in the Florida condo collapse. First responders are shifting from search and rescue to recovery efforts. A moment of silence as first responders pay their respects at the condo collapse site. The mayor calling the decision an extremely difficult one.
To share this news with the families this evening who are still missing their loved ones was devastating.
The assistant fire chief said pancake collapses like this have the lowest chance of survival. There were no pockets or voids where anybody could still be breathing. The dogs had done their searches. Rescue crews had used technology.
We did not get an alert on a K9, a sensor trip for sound, and any visual utilizing our cameras. The last known alert that we received was the initial hours the day of the collapse.
The death toll rose to 60 as 6 more bodies recovered Thursday morning, 80 still unaccounted for. Florida's lieutenant governor says even though it's now a recovery effort, search crews won't let up.
They are going to continue to dig with the same fervor, the same passion, and the same compassion that they feel towards these families to be able to uncover the remains of their loved ones.
Some emergency workers hugging and crying. Miami-Dade firefighters hung a banner saying they mourn with everyone. Religious leaders led people in prayer, nuns in the crowd praying for victims and their loved ones. Now, many turning to legal action, family members of the residents filing at least 6 lawsuits. And a grand jury in the county will examine ways to prevent any more building collapses in the region. Speaking of legal action, dozens of states are suing Google over its App Store practices. Court records show the antitrust lawsuit was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California. 36 states joined the District of Columbia in filing the complaint. It's led by Utah, North Carolina, Tennessee, New York, Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, and Nebraska. The 144-page suit alleges Google holds a monopoly on Android app distribution in the U.S., responsible for over 90% of app downloads for Android devices. On top of that, it claims Google has used restrictive contracts to force Android device makers to promote the Google Play Store at the expense of competition. The suit also takes aim at the up to 30% commission fees Google charges developers for in-app purchases. Utah's Attorney General called Google's monopoly a menace, saying in a statement, Google must be held accountable for harming small businesses and consumers, adding it must stop using its monopolistic power and hyper-dominant market position to unlawfully leverage billions of added dollars from smaller companies, competitors, and consumers beyond what should be paid. Google responded by calling the allegations, quote, meritless. Google's senior director of public policy said in a blog response, "We don't impose the same restrictions as other mobile operating systems do," adding, "So it's strange that a group of state attorneys general chose to file a lawsuit attacking a system that provides more openness and choice than others." This represents the 4th major antitrust lawsuit filed against Google by government agencies across the U.S. since last October. Now, let's turn to a quick update on the latest cyber attack. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki saying Thursday,
"We are continuing to gather details on if this incident occurred with the knowledge or approval of the Russian government. That's what we're really digging into at this point in time. And while the intelligence community has not yet attributed the attack, and we still don't have new information on the attribution as of today, the cyber community, security community agrees that the criminal group, REvil, that we've talked about a bit in here, operates out of Russia with affiliates around the world."
The latest attack hit IT company Kaseya over the weekend, compromising hundreds to thousands of companies around the world. The full extent of the attack is still unknown. This is the latest in a string of cyber attacks targeting critical U.S. infrastructure. The same hacker group in this latest attack, are evil, is the same group who shut down the JBS meat company over Memorial Day. JBS ended up paying the $11 million ransom in Bitcoin. The other big attack on America's largest fuel pipeline forced Colonial Pipeline to shut down its operations in May, causing gas shortages and a price hike in the East Coast. Speaking of rising gas prices, Californians are seeing record high prices again. The West Coast seeing prices going up as high as $5 per gallon. California gas prices hit another record this week. The cost of the fuel statewide soared to an average of $4.30 a gallon, taking it to its highest points in nearly a decade. The U.S. Energy Information Administration says California drivers could spend an extra $16 to fill up their tank. The spike is due to rising demand, but the same supply.
Now that things have improved, gasoline consumption has gone up, but oil production has not.
He says last year oil companies lost billions of dollars in revenue, causing both oil production and prices to plummet into negative territory. And it's not just California. The prices at the pump continue their steady climb as summer travel is in full swing. AAA reports crude oil prices will hit a 7-year high this week. The national gas price average is expected to increase to $3.25 this month. Unfortunately, it's not going to stop there. AAA expects gas prices to rise another 10 to 20 cents through the end of August. The last time the national average gas price was at $3.25 was November and October 2014, respectively. Now, many are wondering about the pros and cons between electric cars and the traditional ones that run on gas. While electric cars are generally considered to be more eco-friendly than traditional gasoline cars, analysis from Reuters shows that you'd need to reach the break-even point to reap the benefits. Many considering getting the latest Tesla is a big step to helping the planet. But it might not be that simple. According to a new Reuters analysis, the benefits only kick in after 13,500 miles. That's the number needed before the electric car does less harm to the environment than a gas-guzzling saloon. It's the latest hot topic as governments eye greener transport to meet climate targets. The model was developed by the Argonne National Laboratory in Chicago. It includes thousands of parameters from the type of metals in an EV battery to the amount of aluminum or plastic in a car. Analysts say making electric vehicles generates more carbon than combustion engine cars, mainly due to the extraction and processing of minerals in EV batteries and production of the power cells. But that doesn't mean it's time to swear off EVs just yet. Daniel Auger from Cranefield University says people will get a false reading if they only consider them at the start of their life cycle.
If you just measure when they come off the production line, you may well find that EVs are higher than some others. But you're not going to be burning the same amount of fossil fuel during the rest of the EV life cycle. Really, you need to be looking at the product right at the end after you've disposed of it. So what are the recycling and disposal costs? What can you reuse? So you need the production, you need the disposal, and you need the use. And without any of those three things, it's not a good comparison.
That means among the points to consider are how the carbon gap will vary over time, where that crucial break-even point comes, and how it can vary. The payback period depends on factors such as the size of the EV's battery, the fuel economy of a gas car, and the power used to charge an EV. It can also depend on what country the car is being driven in. Going back to that 13,500 mile figure, Reuters plugged a series of variables into the Argonne model to compare driving a Tesla 3 in the United States with a gasoline-filled Toyota Corolla. But if that same Tesla was being driven in Norway, which generates almost all its electricity from renewable hydropower, the break-even point would come after just 8,400 miles. Equally, if it was somewhere like China or Poland, which largely rely on coal-based energy, the car would have to be driven 78,700 miles. That may sound like a lot of mileage, but EVs still generally emit far less carbon over a 12-year lifespan.
Yes, EVs are very intensive at the beginning of their life cycle, but really you've got to add that to the fact that they're not very energy intensive when they're being used. They are better than an internal combustion engine then. With any product, you've also got to think about the disposal costs, but the consensus does seem to be very strongly that EVs are a better option over the whole life cycle than a conventional internal combustion engine car, a petrol or diesel car.
And now, before we end, let's hop on over to Japan. Japan's prime minister has now formally declared a state of emergency in Tokyo through the end of the Olympics. The state of emergency goes into effect on July 12th until August 22nd. That's amid surging virus cases. This will be the fourth state of emergency in the Japanese capital. The prime minister stressed in a COVID task force meeting Thursday the need for countermeasures to curb the spread of COVID and its variants. So far, Japan has reported over 800,000 cases and almost 15,000 deaths since the pandemic began. The Summer Olympic Games are set to begin on July 23rd and last until August 8th. This comes as International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach arrived in Tokyo on Thursday, with just over 2 weeks to go before the opening of the Summer Olympics. Olympic organizers have banned all spectators from the Games. The initial plan was to cap domestic viewers at 50% capacity, up to 10,000 people. Anyone wanting to support athletes were told to do so by clapping rather than cheering or singing. But with the recent surge in virus cases, those plans have been scrapped. It's the latest blow to the troubled Summer Games, already delayed by a year because of the pandemic and plagued by a series of setbacks, including massive budget blowouts. Medical experts have said for weeks that having no spectators at the Games would be the least risky option. There's been widespread public concern that the influx of thousands of athletes and officials will fuel a fresh wave of infections. And there's no word yet on if the stadiums will follow in the footsteps of the U.S. and fill the stands with cardboard cutouts. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.